And
innovate
for the better.
It's about being open to people and to ideas.
We believe that we can bring innovation in this world.
Welcome to the last part of this session in which we are looking at the question, why don't we listen more to nature? While innovating, what can we do to be close to nature and to stay close with nature? Mieke, before you start your speech, I have one question. Artificial intelligence looks like something that can be more far away from nature than anything else. Is that correct, or am I wrong?
Well, it all depends on how you define artificial intelligence. And so I think that's where the confusion starts. Artificial intelligence, if you define it as a system that has the ability to learn by itself and to make a decision by itself, I don't think it's that far away from nature. I just think that the way we've inspired the system we've built so far, that we got it a little wrong. And that's what my presentation is all about.
All right, I'm already intrigued. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I decided to make this a very personal story today. And I'm going to take you back to January last year, 2020, when I was invited as a speaker at Sessie, which is known as one of the most famous conferences on new technologies. And I gave a talk on tiny AI, tiny artificial intelligence, which is all about creating systems that solve the current problems in artificial intelligence: latency, connectivity, energy efficiency, and privacy. Now, funny enough, at the end of my presentation, people came up to me to ask questions, but there were no questions on the privacy part. There were no questions on the energy efficiency part. And I thought that's weird. So in that afternoon, I went on to the halls, where all vendors are overwhelming me with their newest IoT systems. And although I didn't understand all the technologies behind it, what I observed is that there were quite a lot of them that were just tackling the boundaries of what's called, the donut economics, which is the social foundations that we've built over years, so the right on privacy, the right on the diversity issue. And there were the other ones that were just really tackling this ecological ceiling. And I thought, but that's weird. So why are people not reacting? Why don't we stick between those two boundaries? Because isn't that what human-centered AI is all about? Making solutions that create value, so to enrich us in the world we're living in, instead of tackling the boundaries. And I got all confused because when I went back to my hotel room that night, my intention was to create the last chapter of my book on what I had seen on the conference. And I started to doubt about everything. There was no single word that was coming out on paper, because I started doubting about the 25 years I'd been working in creating neural networks that were inspired by the human brain. I started to doubt about, all the smart sensors we start to create, intrigued by our human sensors, the ability to do speech recognition, facial recognition, image recognition. And I thought, did we get it wrong? And I decided not to write my last chapter on that because I was just too troubled by it. Now, soon after that, there was Corona kicking in. And I thought, this is it. I'm going to write the last chapter, and I'm going to show the world what the value is of all the investments we've done in artificial intelligence. I'm going to show how data scientists, data and algorithms can help tackle this problem. Because after all, we've had a lot of money received over the years, and we have invested a lot of time in research, so we should be able to help this problem. And to be very transparent, we did a couple of good projects. However, to be very transparent, we didn't make a big impact with our data scientists. Not because the technology wasn't working, but just because we didn't get the basics right. There weren't agreements found on privacy-preserving ways to exchange data between nations. We were doubting about the data quality part of view. We didn't know enough about how viruses mutate, although we've had so much money to do research in AI. I got angry, and I felt empty. And I did something that many people of us did. I went out into nature, something I hadn't done for years because I was too busy chasing AI systems. And I looked at the birds. I looked at the birds, which were with thousands out there, not even having a leader, creating these nice formations, and actually not even colliding with each other. And then I thought again and said, well, what about the 3 drones we have in our labs where we have difficulties to make them collaborate with each other? What didn't we get from nature that could inspire us to have our drones working out much better? I looked at the other animals. I looked at the spiders out there. I looked at the fact that they had no human telling them how to catch food at night in the dark, but they did it. I looked at the trees and the plants and the flowers, and I'm like, how is it possible that they are in a changing economical environment that we find balance time over time over time over time again? How were they able to do this all by themselves? Whereas the models we had been creating, for example, in sales and marketing environments, the recommendation models, they all had to be stopped. Amazon had to stop their models, their analytical models, because they couldn't adapt the change that was happening due to the corona crisis. And I thought, well, this is weird. We need to take a break here. We need to rethink how we have created artificial intelligence systems. And I started by looking at the way our brain works. And our brain isn't following the concept we currently have in AI, going from bigger to biggest systems. Our brain does something very smart in the sense that if we have learned something in a certain domain, for example, we've learned how to play tennis, well, we transfer that learning into another domain, for example, playing squash. Well, our AI systems at the moment, many companies out there restart their training from scratch, consuming a lot of energy. Can't we just pick this effect from nature, some transfer learning? It exists, the technology, in labs, but it hasn't made it to commercial systems. Or when we went outside in spring last year, we were pruning our trees because we know when we cut out these leaves and these parts of the tree, that the energy flow to the tree is going to go better. Similar approach we have in our brain. Without knowing it by consciously, we actually get down the connections in our neurons when they're no longer used. Why don't we prune our neural networks? Because every connection between two neurons is consuming energy. Why don't we use this technique also in our AI systems? Additionally, I looked into the way bees and ants were performing, having little tiny levels of energy, but they were performing very well in distributed way. Something we haven't reached in AI world. But until then, I thought, well, is there something else I'm missing? And I did. Because as Homo academicus, as we all are, we tend to suffer from something I call brain chauvinism. The fact that we can only think about living objects as being intelligent if they have a brain, because they're moving, they're communicating, and they're collaborating with each other. When we look at plants, I never thought them to be intelligent. However, that changed until I started reading the book from Florian Köchler. Florian explains very well in her book that, in fact, plants do move, plants do communicate, only they use fragrances to communicate. She explains in her book very well that Chanel No. 5, my favorite perfume, isn't allowed in her labs. And why is this? Because one of the two main fragrances in it is jasmine. And jasmine produces a plant hormone that sets off stress in plants, which means that if you would wear it in our labs, all plants would be in defense modus, and you wouldn't be able to do a correct research project. I continued my search for this type of information, and I found out, in fact, that there was a whole world of plant intelligence I didn't understand. I didn't know. Many researchers are looking into this from different areas, but they have one thing in common. And the one thing in common is that they're all suffering from lacking research fundings, research budgets to do their research, because it's not seen as something cool. Artificial intelligence and creating human brains seems to be cool, but looking into plant intelligence didn't seem to be cool, although there was so much information in it. And that's where I thought, well, let's just change this. Let's just use events just like this one to move away from human-inspired AI and introduce a new term, nature-centered AI. Nature-centered AI is all going back and getting inspiration from nature in order to make sure we create AI systems that, first of all, stick within these boundaries and make an environment where we can live in. Because the fact is that if you take the nature away, humans will die. If you take humans away, nature will flourish. Thus, I would love to use this event to reach out the hands to biologists from the data science and from the AI experts and try to find new ways of intelligence that are in there, making sure that all the fundings that we have, we look at it to split it better. It became the very last chapter of the book I've written. Thank you very much.
I'm so glad that we had you here on this session, Mieke de Ketelaere. What an inspiring story, so personal. It's reassuring to hear that Homo academicus also has doubts, has to go for a walk and finds inspiration in nature. You're really at the forefront of AI, of course, and it's something that is being invented at the moment. How important will nature and modeling after nature will be, in your opinion?
It will become very important. I think, I mean, and that's a personal opinion. I think for what we've seen last year, I think we need to rethink the way we've done it. We've just got too inspired by because the technology was there and because the cloud environments were there, we actually went into that direction without making reflections enough at, at what we're actually doing and the way we're doing it. And nature is just in front of us and showing how to do it without being taught. And I think we need to get information from this. The fact that nature is so much balanced and we're so imbalanced, I think that's where the source of inspiration should come from.
And what's the imbalance in AI at this moment?
The imbalance in AI is the, the energy inefficiency for me. So the fact that we have chased accuracy in our models, and the better and more accurate our models were, the more money we were getting from, investors, etc. But what we forgot is that back there's actually quite a lot of calculations going in there. And every calculation costs a tiny little bit of energy. So we just lost track of it. And you only see recently there's an initiative called Green AI that we're now balancing out accuracy versus energy efficiency. I mean, there are simple examples. If you ask, for example, Siri to switch on and off the light, it will emit more CO2 than just leaving on the lights. Because somewhere in the US, there's a big system doing this, translation and that calculation sending back the answer. And we don't realize. We just use our little mobile phone over here.
Absolutely, it's the first time I think about
Don't realize it. Yeah.
So that's one of the problems, and one of the links with nature. The other link you make is funding. How are we going to get more funding into nature-inspired AI?
I think just like everything, when do you get funding? If something becomes cool, if you can show the value of it. And I think we just need to find, and it was also coming up in the previous talk, find more multidisciplinary debates on it, making sure that we work more together, not just having engineers doing something with technology, but having this cross-domain collaboration. I think that's what we should really looking forward to.
Yeah, we are seeing nature sometimes apart from humans, but of course we make part of nature too. We are part of nature. And in this session of the End Festival, it occurs to me that we're not talking about AI as something separate from us. 3 years ago, AI was something big going to happen, and we were afraid of it. And now it seems to me that it's become a partner. How do you see that?
Well, I still see some tension between the believers and the non-believers. I think we've did a very good job on taking that tension away, showing what it is and what's not. But there's still a big group of people that don't even know what it is. The fact that it's, that it's everywhere in our world today. When we look at Netflix, when we look at Spotify, but when we go to the bank, etc., it's everywhere around us. But there's still a lot of people that have this complexity bias when you start talking about it. They want to use the technology, but they don't want to know how exactly it's in there. But that also implicates that they don't know the risks of it. And so I think there's more translation needed, but it's getting better. Absolutely.
Yeah, we see it more like a partner, and that is better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Last question, perhaps we'll see, because your answers are also interesting always. We use, of course, it in Netflix and all kinds of stuff. But I see a lot of times very bad AI too. How quick is that going to be better? And is the AI really going to give what is promised?
Well, it's a very interesting question because something happened yesterday. AI experts were waiting for it a long time. But the legal context, in which companies can operate has been specified by Europe, our first attempt to specify it. So I think people are aware of the good, the bad, and what I call the ugly. And it's the ugly part that needs to have some context and needs to have a framework around it. We're not there yet, because points like what is fairness, who's going to define what's fair? That can depend on the context where you're living in. So these are not easy questions to answer. And putting a framework that works for all these type of different flavors of AI is a difficult one. But I think also here the multidisciplinary debate is the one that's going to move us forward.
Okay, but these debates are not for now. Now we were talking about nature, and you did so brilliantly. Thank you so much for being with us here.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mieke de Ketelaere was our last speaker in this session. Why don't we listen more to nature? I don't think we got a real answer to that question, but I know we need to listen more, and that was very clear. Next session is up ahead, and the question there is, are we asking the right questions? I'm not sure. We'll see.
And innovate for the better.
Leuven is a hub of innovation.
It's a very diverse, compact city.
That is certainly exciting.